Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the delightful Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour over 3 years ago in the throes of the pandemic. Yes, over 200 writers ago during the pandemic, the official pandemic, to help people stay connected to each other through stories every week. And it's been so much fun. We've been back pretty much every Wednesday. And tonight we have a very special one because we have the return of Karlo Yeager Rodríguez, and we have the Story Hour debut of Joyce Reynolds-Ward. And I should also mention that one of the reasons we can all be here is because we have a 2023 Givers Fund grant from SIFWA. So thank you very much, SIFWA, for helping us keep Story Hour going. We really appreciate it. If you can, please consider donating to tonight's featured nonprofits, the Seroptimus International of Wallowa County and the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Joyce Reynolds-Ward is reading for Seroptimus International of Wallowa County. It is a nonprofit volunteer service organization working in Wallowa County, Oregon. SI of Wallowa County provides financial support to local projects including safe harbors, food bank, Meals on Wheels, community connection programs, mammogram screening, and library programs. It also awards scholarships for college and technical school to local students, grants for community projects that improve the lives of women and girls, and financial awards for women continuing their education and to recognize women and girls who make a difference in the community. You can learn more at WallowaCountySeroptimist.org. We'll also drop the link later because Wallowa is not the most intuitive thing to spell. It's like wallow with an A at the end. Karlo Yeager Rodríguez is reading for the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Founded in 1991 by concerned humanitarians in the USA, PCRF provides free medical care to thousands of injured and ill children yearly who lack local access to care within the local healthcare system. Over the years, PCRF sent over 2,000 affected children abroad for free medical care, sent thousands of international doctors and nurses to provide tens of thousands of children free medical care in local hospitals, and provided tens of thousands of children humanitarian aid and support they otherwise would not get. Right now, PCRF is apparently one of the main players in trying to keep children healthy in Gaza. So you can learn more at pcrf.net. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat. If you're joining us on Textbook, you may also feel free to chime in on the text chat. But if we don't answer, it's not because we don't love you. It's just because we're more in the Zoom. We'll catch up later, though, I promise. Our first reader tonight is Karlo Yeager Rodríguez. Karlo Yeager Rodríguez. I was rolling my R's so well until I was having to say your name. Karlo Yeager Rodríguez is originally from the enchanting island of Puerto Rico, but moved to the Baltimore area some years ago, where he now lives with his wife and one odd dog. His fiction has appeared in Uncanny, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and Correo magazine. He is also the host of Podside Picnic, where he and his co-hosts discuss the literature of the fantastic, and the nonfiction editor for Seize the Press magazine. Karlo, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure.
All right. Is everyone ready for a bad time?
I'm ready.
All right. So should I just launch into it?
Just hit us with it.
Okay, so my story is in Strange Horizons, up in the hills, she dreams of her daughter deep in the ground. Up in the hills, where the green shadows grow long, and far from all the student protests in San Juan, Gloria and her husband Pedro lived in a tiny house, an almost perfect square of concrete in the center of a space carved out of the surrounding jungle, their closest neighbors nearly a mile away. Every morning, Pedro drove his little Toyota down the narrow ribbon of asphalt to work at the pharmaceutical factory the next town over, leaving Gloria alone with her housework until he returned. Theirs had never been a marriage born of passion, but a way for her to finally get out from under the shadow of her family. Being sturdy country folk, sending Gloria to university was seen as inviting godlessness into the family. Dios mío, can you imagine all those students throwing rocks at the police? Even if there had been money for that type of thing, getting married was simply the next thing to do. Pedro hadn't even been someone Gloria felt any attraction to, but the focus of her younger sister, Eulalia, who joined her mother in mocking Gloria for being a jamona, a spinster. It had been Eulalia who swooned over Pedro at church or at the market when she caught a glimpse of him buying plantains or dried cod crusted with salt. So Gloria stole him from her, partly to get back at her, but also because she didn't know what to do next. Their wedding was small but celebrated. In spite of herself, Gloria was happy. But soon enough, the glow faded and her life as Mrs. Villanueva took on the predictable rhythm of a much older marriage. Pedro was decent and hardworking, but rather dull and attached to his routines. At times, she chafed at his adherence to responsibility, but often succeeded in squelching her dissatisfaction by reminding herself Pedro had been a means to an end. Even so, with each day plodding its way to the next, she soon lost track of the months as they stretched into years. Gloria also suspected her dislike of her husband's love of routine was something she saw in herself, a thought she could only admit in the small hours before dawn, when sleep fled her, something she was almost sure had started after their first year together. Not prone to daydreams or flights of fancy, Gloria was nevertheless afflicted by a peculiar dream. Her belly grew round as if with child, only for an ají plant to sprout from her navel. Every night her other dreams would fall away or transform, and she would find her belly swelling, stretch marks growing like stripes on her skin. Then the plant burst from her, broadly green leaves unfurling, narrow red peppers lengthening until they peeked out from under the shelter of the foliage. Gloria didn't think of it as a nightmare, even as its arrival drove her to wakefulness. She was never frightened in the dream. She'd lurch awake to find Pedro snoring beside her. He noticed the dark half moons under her eyes eventually. Maybe I should take you down to see Dr. Mendoza, Pedro said over his morning coffee. I could talk to my shift supervisor to get time off next week. From where she drank her own coffee, leaning against the kitchen sink, Gloria accepted. Sitting next to Pedro, Gloria waited for Dr. Mendoza to finish reading their files. Diplomas from Universidad de Madrid and Johns Hopkins hung on one wall, with several photos of what she presumed were former patients on another. The doctor, a sleek little man, hair slicked back with brilliantine, wire-rimmed glasses, and a precise goatee, set his cigarette on a crystal ashtray at the corner of his desk before speaking. It could be insomnia. I could run some quick tests on you at the clinic, Dr. Mendoza said before glancing at Pedro. Maybe next week? Pedro grimaced. I don't think I can get time off that soon. It's nothing, really, Gloria said. Both men stared at her, but Gloria fixed her gaze on Pedro, who after a moment had the decency to look away, stammering something about being worried for her health. Gloria turned on Dr. Mendoza. How much would these tests cost? Dr. Mendoza met her eyes before grinning at Pedro as if sharing a private joke. Gas money to drive her to the hospital, that's it. Research grant covers the tests. Confused, Pedro smiled back. Dr. Mendoza had them sign paperwork assuring them it was a necessary formality. If you can't sign, all I need is a mark, he said, when pointing out where their signatures were needed. Gloria bristled at the doctor's presumption they couldn't read or write, even as Pedro shrugged and followed his instructions. Even with 2 weeks' notice, Pedro couldn't get more than a half day to take Gloria to her tests. Only enough time to drop her off before doubling back to clock into his shift. They drove down through the hairpin turns in silence, radio turned down to a murmur in the background. Once the road leveled off, Gloria glanced at her husband. What? Pedro said. The doctor only talks to you. I told you already. They're looking for excuses to cut my hours. You think we can afford that? If you hate that job so much, why are you bending over backwards to keep it? She knew she sounded petulant, but she wanted to fight almost as much as she wanted him to stay with her, to ignore his job, even if he got fired. Just stay with me, please. In the end, he dropped her off at the front entrance. He didn't bother turning off the car, just drove off to work, still angry. Gloria woke to pain, dull, constant. It throbbed through her. Details trickled in between pulses, the fizzle of fluorescence, light stuttering, pastel walls around her, gone grubby with time, with use. Her hospital robe crinkled, like those knockoff paper towels her mother always warned against. Lo barato sale caro, she always said. A vague memory, Dr. Mendoza asking her what triggered her insomnia, drifted into focus. She struggled to connect it with anything else as she lifted her robe. An angry red smile had been cut into her inches below her navel. Deep in the cut, crusted blood, as black as the stitching. Still in the fog, she wanted to scream. A hollow rage filled her instead as she understood what Dr. Mendoza had done to her. What Pedro had sat there and accepted instead of what? Pedro had always been too meek, too deferential for her to expect him to prevent an important man like Dr. Mendoza from cutting out her womb with all the cold pragmatism of scraping seeds. But he should be here. He should be made to bear witness. Trembling with fury, she turned away from the approaching nurse, hot tears leaking onto her pillow. Once she was home, Pedro's concern rankled, but the process of mending left Gloria too wrung out to do much more than accept his help in sullen silence. For the first few weeks, she could tell what day it was by when he left, when he came back, when he stayed home, but she was adrift. She gritted her teeth every time she was too weak to walk on her own, or had to depend on Pedro to get to the bathroom, lower her onto the toilet. As soon as she was well enough, she insisted on sleeping on the couch in their living room. She told Pedro it was because she'd be closer to the bathroom and didn't want to wake him in the middle of the night. What she didn't tell him was the dream had returned. One night, she woke barefoot, standing at the edge of their back plot, jungle looming over her, staring at a he plant that reached her chest. Its long red peppers looked as black as blood in the moonlight. At first, a thin voice rose to her, and as Gloria pushed aside the plant's leaves to find its source, she realized it was coming from under it, underground. Using her bare hands, she dug into the red clay. She scooped dirt out faster as the voice became clearer, only stopping when her fingertips brushed against the cold curve of someone's pale cheek. Startled, she flinched away, falling on her ass. A twinge of pain shot through her abdomen, furred black closing in on the edges of her sight. Panting, she waited until the pain faded before peering into the hole, past the roots, thicker than she'd expected, and saw a girl's face, as pale and cold as a statue in profile. Dirt freckled her cheek and seemed embedded in the corners of her closed eye, her mouth. Gloria stood, eyes fixed on the girl, as if by digging she had uncovered a viper's nest. She backed away, one step after another, until her back was against the sliding glass doors leading back inside, a hand searching for the handle. Mama, the girl in the hole said, don't leave me. With the gray light of dawn, Gloria rubbed the grit from her eyes and realized she didn't remember anything after she heard the voice. She jerked her blanket aside and went to the glass door, staring. She couldn't find the ahi bush in the riot of growth at the edge of the yard. Her hand, resting on the handle to the sliding door she'd meant to open but had not, was smeared with mud. Crescents of dirt caked under her fingernails. This was what occupied her mind when Pedro talked to her about getting a lawyer over breakfast. She realized he'd been staring at her, waiting for her response. Sorry, Gloria mumbled. What happened? Don't you want him to pay for what he did? Pedro raised his voice, angry he needed to repeat himself. Gloria bit back her weary answer. She had already paid the price, so what was the point? Spend money they didn't and might never have? And for what? It wouldn't undo what had been done to her. She knew Pedro expected her to want to do something, to act. So what happened to her didn't happen to other women. But that might mean letting others who knew almost nothing about her see her as a victim. It would mean she would have to think of herself as a victim. Then again, maybe Pedro didn't want to see himself that way either. So used to believing he was in control, he thought he was owed justice, and misunderstanding their blows so devastating, there was no hope of redress. One could only try to live with the aftermath. Instead, she said, just find a lawyer who'll do it pro bono. Only then did Pedro notice the red clay smeared on her hands. Why are your hands so dirty? Not waiting for her answer, he stood up, drank the last gulp of his coffee, and put his dishes in the sink. I need to go in early, but we can talk more about the lawyer when I get back. Gloria was relieved when he at last drove off to work. Another restless night. Gloria found herself curled around the hole at the base of the ají plant again. She rested her head in the crook of one elbow, her other hand dangling over the edge to stroke the girl's cheek as she spoke. Stay, Mama. The bad dreams come when you go, she said in her small voice, and Gloria remembered long nights when her own mother had stayed by her bedside to keep her nightmares at bay. How soon that had changed. As soon as Eulalia was born, Gloria had been expected to grow out of crying for her mother in the middle of the night. Never mind that her waking world did nothing but grow those bad dreams tall enough. She was always walking in their shadows. No, Gloria wouldn't let her daughter feel alone and left to fend for herself. She cooed and murmured assurances, realizing that even though she was unsure how, the girl was her daughter and as real as the dimple of scar tissue under her navel. I'm not going anywhere. But when will you come to me? Her daughter fell silent long enough for Gloria to raise herself on her elbow and look down into the hole. Her daughter's eyes had opened. With every slow blink, deepening the furrow on her brow, flecks of clay were caught in her lashes, her eyebrows. Bebe? Gloria cupped her hand against her cheek. I can't, the girl said. If I could pull myself out of the ground, I would wither. You will have to come to me, Mama. The girl took Gloria's hands. Her grip was as cold as anything underground, untouched by the sun, and as strong. But for a moment, Gloria half expected to get pulled down into the hole, to curl protectively around her daughter down there in the dark and damp. Then the girl's grip softened and settled into a gentle, familiar shape. Gloria recognized from her own youth the trusting grasp of a child surrendering to her mother's guidance through the Plaza Publica, or a park filled with people, or a department store. If the girl had indeed pulled her down into the ground now, Gloria wouldn't have resisted. Gloria started at the sound of Pedro's car pulling into the carport. She'd half dozed through the whole day. Kicking off blankets heavy with sweat into a tangle at her feet, she got up. Their breakfast dishes rose from the sink like an accusation, and she hadn't taken anything out for dinner. Shaking off her lethargy, she turned the spigot and watched it flow until water steamed. Gloria? Pedro glanced at the dishes when he walked in and noticed she was still wearing the same oversized shirt she'd been wearing this morning. Gloria was sure he could smell her from where he stood. What's going on? Nothing. Gloria stared through the steam. Don't say nothing. Pedro's voice rang against the walls of the kitchen before he managed to bite back the rest. After a moment, he tried again, voice threatening to unravel without warning. Gloria, mi amor, mi vida. It's obvious. Something's happening. Gloria stood at the sink, jaw clenching and unclenching. How dare he act like the voice of reason? He couldn't have found out about the girl, the one she was sure was her daughter, could he? It wasn't until Pedro reached past her to turn off the water and ask what girl she was talking about that Gloria realized she'd spoken aloud. She's under an ají plant. In our yard, Gloria said, already hating how she sounded admitting this to Pedro, but doing it anyway. Who else could she tell? She's my daughter. Pedro's face shifted, softened. Your. He chewed on the word, swallowed, tried again. Our daughter? Pedro's fingers brushed her arm as if he wanted to steady himself, but Gloria squirmed away from his touch until the kitchen counter dug into her back. She debated correcting him by repeating, my daughter, but nodded. He looked away before speaking again, voice flat. Do you remember signing paperwork before you went to the hospital? What? The lawyer showed me. Pedro shook his head, afraid to meet her eyes. He said that no judge would care what Dr. Mendoza promised, only what the papers we signed said. Pedro's look of superiority drove out any feelings of fatalism Gloria might have had. But he lied to us. Maybe. Pedro wouldn't meet her eyes. The lawyer won't take the case. You're just going to accept that? Find another one. Any good lawyer would say the same. Gloria glared at him, speechless, until her fury boiled up. Why do I bother? You're worthless. She punctuated the last word by scooping her coffee cup out of the sink and flinging it at the wall, where it shattered. Pedro's eyes flashed, and she thought, finally. But instead of fighting her, he took his keys and left. After that, Pedro spent long hours away. Gloria was left to wander the cramped rooms of the house, often leaving the small radio in the kitchen on all day, depending on strangers' voices for company. Some nights he'd return, while others he'd call her to let her know he was staying at his mother's or sister's house. Gloria wondered if he was telling her the truth, even as she was certain he was not. The men of her own family had been found out, keeping mistresses and sometimes whole other families hidden the next mountain, the next town over. She knew she should be upset, act betrayed, if only for appearances, but instead, she was relieved. In the full dark that came when night fell in the mountains, on the very edge between dreams and waking, Gloria found herself once again curled around the ají plant. Her hand once more dangled over the edge of the hole, hand in hand with the girl underground. Her daughter. She crooned an old shapeless tune she half remembered her own mother singing to her as a young girl. The night air was velvety warm, but Gloria couldn't stop shivering, as if the chill that never left her daughter's skin had soaked her through. Mama, the girl's voice sounded so far away. I'm here, mi amor, Gloria said. Don't leave me. Never, Gloria said. Eyes closed, Gloria's entire world shrank to her daughter's hand in hers. Gloria didn't notice the sweep of headlights, the familiar sound of Pedro pulling into the driveway, the creak of the Toyota's door opening. I'll be here for you as long as you live. As if from the edges of sleep, Gloria heard Pedro calling her name, faint at first, but louder, after Gloria refused to respond. She just wanted him to give up and go away. She decided he would not take her time with her daughter away from her. When at last he stood open the patio door, Pedro stood swaying before remembering the flashlight in his hand. He cursed under his breath as he struggled with the blunt thing designed for hurricane season and not his drunken fumblings. After some more curses, he finally clicked it on. Maria. His voice slid over her name as he waved the flashlight beam around. She remained silent, but her daughter whimpered. Don't let him take you away from me, she said. She sounded so tiny and afraid. Gloria cooed and murmured, I won't. Don't worry. I won't. Promise. A beam of light blinded Gloria, interrupting what she'd been about to say, and from behind the piercing glare came Pedro's voice. Gloria, why are you sleeping out here? God, she could smell the rum on his breath from where she was lying on the ground. A miracle he'd been able to drive at all like that. The girl shrank away from the light with a low moan, her cold fingers curving into claws before releasing Gloria's hand. No, it couldn't be. Pedro drew near and settled into an unsteady crouch next to her, asking, Who are you talking to? He craned his neck to see what Gloria had been holding, shining his light deeper into the hole. Out of sight below, Gloria heard the girl, her daughter, keening. The wordless cries tore at her. So she turned on Pedro and slapped away his light. For the love of God, turn it off. You're hurting her. The square thing flew out of his hand and tumbled to rest under some brush a few yards away. Pedro looked from where it landed back to Gloria before speaking. Who? My daughter. Pedro's mouth worked before he was able to ask, We have a daughter? He crawled to the edge of the hole and peered inside, a rush of apologies and promises to be a good father tumbling out of him as if bottled up for a long time. When he heard no reply, he pleaded with the girl to come up out of the ground. Struck by his sudden behavior, Gloria didn't think to do anything until he began to scoop out even more dirt by the fistful, uprooting the ají plant in his effort to dig her out. The girl writhed, her face contorted in a silent scream as her arm up to the shoulder was uncovered. Stop, Gloria pulled on his shoulder, but he simply kept digging as if he couldn't see the girl. Pedro, you're hurting her. Stop. Pedro yanked her hands away, snarling, "How dare you hide my daughter from me?" He dug a bit more, then stopped when he was racked with laughter. And even though Gloria could now see through her daughter's pale face to something behind it, dark and shriveled as a tangle of old roots, she was her daughter, not Pedro's. She would not let him take that from her. So she hooked the flashlight in one hand and swung it at him. It bounced off the back of his skull, and he slumped forward into the hole for a minute, long enough for what Pedro had been digging out to clamp her cold hands onto his cheeks and shriek her fury. He jumped, scrambling backwards, away from the hole. Visibly shaking, he glanced at Gloria before he fled, gunning the Toyota's little motor before fishtailing out of the driveway. In the aftermath, Gloria turned off the flashlight and reached down into the hole. Under the now uprooted and trampled ají plant. Only clay, cold and damp as old blood, met her fingers. And no matter how many times she called down into the darkness, she received no answer. Feeble tears burned their way out. But she didn't have enough strength to cry. Instead, she lay next to the hole, humming and tracing the edges of the plant's leaves until sleep came. It seemed she'd only closed her eyes, but woke to sunlight slanting through the trees and someone rattling a stick or something against the driveway gate. It took Gloria a few minutes to recognize she was the Senora Villanueva they were calling. She was still wiping dirt off her cheek and clothes when she approached the gate and froze. The police officer holstered her flashlight and solemnly asked Gloria if she and her partner could come in. She opened the gate, but she knew why they had come. She received the news of Pedro's death dry-eyed and calm, nodding as they told her he'd missed one of the curves on their narrow road. She was a widow, and so young she imagined people talking about her. Distantly, it dawned on Gloria that she had no idea what widows did outside of wear black and go to church more often. Thankfully, the police officers didn't feel the need to fill the silences that stretched out, and after glancing at each other, rose and offered her their cards if she needed anything. Gloria sat through the funeral despite Pedro's sisters and other family members whispering to each other and staring at her when they thought she wasn't looking. Gloria wore her widow's black like armor. Months later, the gossip that she'd all but killed Pedro herself reached Gloria in her isolation. She guessed Pedro's family was furious she'd gotten the house they'd bought for him, but didn't let that ruffle her. She learned to order groceries for delivery since she hadn't bought a car yet. One afternoon, she found a handful of fresh ají peppers she hadn't ordered atop one of the grocery bags full of Goya black bean cans. She placed the peppers on the kitchen table, her eyes straying to them as she put everything away. Even as she fried up some cube steak and onions, she could feel their presence the way one feels the warmth of the sun. When she sat down to eat, she couldn't help but set aside her plate to take the sprig of peppers in trembling hands. Would it work? She wasn't sure, but pressed her hands together to get them to stop shaking long enough to cut one of the peppers lengthwise. The sharp smell dug its barbs into her nose and drew tears she'd promised herself never to shed again. She scooped out the seeds, so white against the red flesh of the ají, and took them to the very edge of her yard, where the green shadows were deepest, to put them in the ground and hope.
Thank you, Karlo.
Wow. Thank you so much, Karlo. That was beautiful. And beautifully read, too.
Yes, very much so. Thank you, Karlo.
And he did warn us.
Yes.
I did.
Mm.
Very powerful story. Well, in between the readers, we have our custom is to just take a breath, integrate the first story into ourselves, breathe out, and be ready for the next story. That was Karlo Yeager Rodríguez. Thank you. Our next reader tonight is Joyce Reynolds-Ward. Joyce Reynolds-Ward has been called the best writer I've never heard of by one reviewer. Her work includes themes of high-stakes family and political conflict, digital sentience, personal agency and control, realistic strong women, and, whenever possible, horses, frequently in Pacific Northwest settings. She enjoys mixing up science fiction and fantasy with Western themes and stories, as well as with romance. Joyce is the author of the Netwalk Sequence series, the Goddess's Honor series, the Martinaire Legacy series, the People of the Martinaire Legacy series, and the Martinaire Multiverse series, as well as standalones Federation Cowboy, Beating the Apocalypse, Clone Stronghold, and Alien Savvy. She is a self-published fantasy blog-off semifinalist, a Writers of the Future semifinalist, and an anthology builder finalist. She is the secretary of the Northwest Independent Writers Association, a member of SIFWA, and a member of Soroptimist International, who she's reading for tonight. Joyce, welcome to Story Hour.
Yes, I might add, I'm also the chair of the Community Projects Budget Committee, so I get a lot of these requests, but a lot of the requests that we get are for women who are many times trying to start out a new life. And being that we are very rural here and 70 miles from the nearest interstate, that can be a challenge. Okay, I do have one warning for mild violence. But other than that, this is a story of transformation, previously published in Alma Alexander's River anthology. You can currently find it in my Fabulous and Fantastical Worlds short story collection, which is available at the usual suspects as well as on Bookshop. And the Bookshop is where you can get the paperback version. Okay, so here we go. River Kissed. Martha paused at the great river's edge. The cold spring flow delicately tickled her toes as dusk's shadows crept toward her. An anticipatory shudder ran through her lean, wiry body. The river rumbled solemnly by, the steady lapping of waves on the shore a soft, lulling chorus as evening unfolded. The distant kee, kee, kee of a startled killdeer stirred Martha into taking the first step into the river. Mud and sand billowed around her feet as she slid her feet along the bottom and measured careful steps. The steady current flowed strong, tugging at Martha's body as the waters swirled up to her crotch. Her next step found nothing but water beneath it. Martha pulled her foot back, seeking the edge. It was barely an inch in front of her standing leg. She heard the mountain river she'd been dedicated to. If she'd turned her eyes upstream, she could see its outflow. Martha didn't look. The river known as the mountain's child was her past. Her present and future lay with the great river. She kept her eyes focused straight ahead, bracing against the tug of river's current. She pulled off her snug-fitting, embroidered turtleneck, revealing stringy arm muscles and flabby breasts that lay flat against her chest. To you this gift, O river, Martha threw the shirt as far as she could out into the river. The current caught the turtleneck. Then, poof, it was gone. The river gives, the river takes, Martha muttered through chattering teeth. Blessed be the name of the river. She ran her fingers along her bare neck, fingering the gills developing under her skin. The skin moved, but showed no sign of separating yet. The change will happen soon enough, she said. She squatted in the cold water until it pulsed against her chin. She stripped off the rest of her clothing, letting the river pull each piece from her fingers as she removed it. At last, the only thing she wore was the medallion old Jihan, the storekeeper, had given her that morning, hanging from a slender black leather thong that seemed too heavy for the heavy silver discs. The river lifted the medallion slightly off of Marth's neck. She covered it with one hand as she faced west, watching the sun ooze behind the hills. At last the sun was gone, leaving only a faint golden glow in the sky. A matching glow came from her little fire above the waterline. She stood and lost her balance, toppling into the water. The river pulled Marth over the drop-off. A brief surge of panic washed over her as the waters closed over her head. Can I breathe water yet? She wondered, holding her breath as the river pulled her down deep. But she didn't test her developing gills. If she breathed the water now, she was no different than any other person lost to the river. The current snatched at her medallion with watery fingers, lifting it off her neck. No, Marth thought. Don't get greedy. The river chuckled. Not yet, Marth thought. Not this time. Not this place. Be patient. Wait. The river sighed. The current holding Marth eased. She kicked hard, and her head broke the surface of the water, bobbing up 100 yards downriver from her fire. The medallion settled against her chest as Marth swam upriver until her fingers and toes brushed against the sandy bottom. Marth gathered up driftwood on her way back to camp and threw it on the fire all at once so she could dry herself. Once dry, she rummaged in her pack for another pair of pants and a shirt. Then she ate jerky and dried fruit, washing it down with small mouthfuls of the pint of old overshoes she had bought from Jahan this morning. River kissed, the river whispered to her in soft gurgles and lapping. River kissed, come dance with me. Not yet, Marth said. She took one last fiery mouthful of old overshoes, tucked the bottle away, and then settled her pack to use it as a pillow and crawled into her bedroll. River kissed, the river sang to her as she settled into sleep. Be mine, O river kissed. I ask for first night's protection, Marth finally murmured. The waves lapped strongly against the shore for 4 splashes, then eased back into their steady, quiet pattern. Not yet for the dance, O river kissed, the river whispered, but soon you will be mine. Soon, Marth agreed, but not here, at Swedetown. Not here, the river echoed, but we will dance soon at Swedetown. Marth turned over and went to sleep. Next morning, Marth knelt by the ashes of her fire. She drizzled the last of her cooking oil over a handful of ashes. Then she used a fingertip to trace 3 wavy parallel lines, sign of the river kissed, on her forehead and on each cheek. Marth waded back into the river and rinsed her hands. She checked her marks and the faint reflection of the river, pushing back her scraggly, colorless, ash blonde hair from her face, scowling. Out of practice, she said aloud. Too quiet on the mountains, child. Good enough for the city, River chuckled at her. This morning he seemed playful, almost smaller and younger. He ran 10 feet lower than the night before, revealing a strip of firm, damp sand. Tide's going out, Marth thought. She had heard of the effect the ocean's tide had on the river even here, 100 miles inland from the ocean. Had heard about the tide effect lasting 100 miles more upriver, all the way to the great falls that roared over the remnants of one of the mighty dams that had once tamed the river. She trudged out of the water and up the bank, her pack and bedroll weighted by the exhausted fire. A light upriver breeze stirred the river's smooth surface as Marth shouldered her pack and began walking. Gulls glided around her, looking for food. Marth ignored them, studying the broad, flat expanse of the river. It looked wider than she could swim easily, wide enough to swallow 10 of the mountain's child without visible effect. Her gull companions gave up and flew downriver, joining another pack squabbling over something at river's edge. Martha squinted, but she couldn't see what the attraction was. A bald eagle dived toward the gulls. They complained loudly as they scattered. The eagle landed. It shook itself to settle its feathers, then marched toward what the gulls had found and began to peck at it. Martha ventured further up the bank. The eagle spread its wings protectively over its find, a huge spring salmon carcass, screeching as Martha eased by. The gulls took advantage of her presence to harass the eagle until it took flight and chased them. The eagle cut in front of her, dropping a feather. Martha stooped to pick it up, watching the eagle. It reminded her of the image on her medallion. "Thank you," she said as she braided the feather into her hair. She allowed herself a couple of skipping steps along river's sands before settling back into her walking stride. She would be dancing with River soon enough. Best to husband her strength. What remained of the city still lay ahead of her. Soon enough, a low, broken dike intruded upon the sandy river shoreline. Martha scrambled on top of the dike, following a thin path that grew wider. The only sign of settlement was a field of stumps where someone had been cutting the cottonwood and ash groves near the dike. The stump field gave way to the broken, scorched remains of buildings and twisted, scarred lumps of metal that had once been equipment of some sort. Martha quickened her steps, these first signs of the old ones making her nervous. She came to a tall, tightly woven wire fence that ran over the top of the dike and down into river. On the other side of the fence, away from river, a crude settlement of shacks and lean-tos huddled against the fence, some using the wire as essential framework. A gate sat square on top of the dike, held closed by a loop of wire. Martha undid the wire. "Who says you can pass?" A lean, lanky man clad in rags marched out of the nearest lean-to. "Pilgrim's right," Martha shouted back, pointing to her cheeks and forehead. The man went inside his lean-to. Martha stepped through the gate, fastening it tightly shut behind her. She didn't blame the man's challenge. Strange things lived in the wild, human and animal both, especially if one wasn't river-kissed or mountain-embraced. Yells broke out below her. Martha quickened her stride, not quite breaking into a run. "No trouble," she told herself. "No trouble." The yells from the settlement grew louder. Martha broke into a jog trot. The earth gave way under her feet. Martha tumbled down the dike, landing in a mud puddle. She staggered back to her feet, shaking her head. She was vaguely aware of people surrounding her. "Don't move." The man who first challenged her jabbed her in the chest with a sharpened, heavy stick. "Pilgrim's right," Martha gasped. She rested one hand on her knife's hilt. The other men laughed. "Pilgrim's right," one of them sneered. "Who goes on pilgrimage?" "I am river-kissed," Martha said, touching her cheeks and forehead again. "I go to Swedetown, to her." "Bride of the river," a younger man yelled. "Woo! We've got a bride of the river, boys." The pack closed in on Martha. She pulled her knife, sickeningly aware of the odds against her. 5 men. 3 were old and frail, possibly enough for her to best in combat, but 2 were younger, scraggly-toothed and scrawny, but young. These 2 advanced closer, grinning at Martha. "Come dance with us, baby," one crooned, leering at Martha. One man lunged at Martha, grabbing her pack and spinning her around. She stabbed at the young man, unable to get any blows in beyond quick slashes. Another man jumped on her back. Martha shook him and her pack off. She twisted free and took off running. Better to leave the pack than risk further attack. I come to you empty-handed, O River. It was what she was supposed to do. But her plan to discard her belongings had been more systematic than this act of robbery. Someone tackled Martha, bringing her down right at the top of the dike. She struck at her attacker with her knife. He twisted her knife away. She kicked at him. He kneed her in the gut. Martha gasped for air. His hands tore at her shirt and ripped it open, sending buttons flying. Aha! What's this? He asked, picking up her medallion and grimy fingers. No, not that. The man's fingers tightened greedily. The thong held firm. No, Martha moaned. Oh no. She found the strength to shove him off of her. She rolled to her knees and half ran, half fell to the side of the dike, tumbling into river. The footing dropped straight down here, bottom far below her feet as the waters closed over her head. Martha gasped at the shock of River's coldness. Her lungs choked on the water and panic surged through her limb. I can't breathe. River-kissed she might be, but she wasn't ready for transformation yet. I failed. Then her head broke free of the water. She floundered along the surface, coughing, struggling to find her rhythm in the water. Harmony is broken, something keened inside of her. Harmony is broken. She felt at her neck for the medallion. It still hung in place. Martha relaxed. Her arms suddenly, joyously, found River's rhythm, moving in harmony with her legs. She coughed, but even the cough, bringing up the last dregs of water in her system, was now in harmony with the rest of her body and with River. Free! But at what cost? No food, no other clothing, no money, nothing but what she stood in. River takes and River gives. What happened from here would be in River's hands. Help me, she whispered to River. Help me to Swedetown. It's not time for me to change yet. It was too bad that she couldn't swim all the way to Swedetown. After transformation, she could. But she wasn't transformed yet. Hoy! Swimmer! The high-pitched call came from mid-river. Martha spotted a canoe downriver, its rider paddling upriver smoothly. She hesitated, then waved a hand. Help! She ventured, taking a chance. The paddler sounded female. Hopefully, not another predator from the city. Be right there, the paddler answered. Martha side-stroked toward the canoe. She grabbed the bow, hanging it tight. You have problems with the juniors? The paddler asked. This close, Martha could see she was indeed female. They attacked me. Had to leave my pack. The woman shook her head ruefully. Roll on in. You're river-kissed, aren't you? Yes, Martha gasped. She carefully climbed in. Bastards. The woman spun the canoe around. Catch your breath. My name's Rahana of Swedetown. Swedetown reaches out to me already? She breathed silent thanks to River. Martha, she said, on pilgrimage to Swedetown. Martha of the Mountain's child, right? How did you know? Rahana laughed. Jahan sent Butril a message. Hidden mothers waiting. I hoped it was you I'd spotted, but I wasn't sure. Martha felt her neck. The skin moved more easily under her fingers than it had the night before. I thought I had 2 more days to travel. Hidden Mother wants you. Now. Rahana dug in hard with her paddle. So off to Hidden Mother we go. I'll help. Sit back and rest. You'll need your strength soon enough. Martha sprawled against the canoe's bow, her gut tightening into icy, nervous shards. She pulled the remains of her ruined shirt across her chest to shelter her skin from the sun and fingered the medallion. The upriver breeze ruffled her wet hair, and the forgotten eagle feather brushed across Martha's fingers, still there despite her battle. Martha untangled the feather. Blessing of the eagle. It was miraculous that the feather had managed to remain twined in her hair. She wondered if the feather was meant to relay Hidden Mother's urgency. A shiver ran through Martha's body. A creepy, crawly feeling like maggots working under her skin tickled under her ribs. The change is coming, she realized as the shivers grew stronger. Rahana crawled forward, gently pulling Martha flat, slipping off her pants and shirt before wrapping her body in a tarp. Change is coming fast, Rahana said. This'll keep you Hidden Mothers in a hurry. This'll keep you safe from the sun while it happens. Thank you. Martha closed her eyes gratefully, clutching the eagle feather in her hand. The skin moved away easily from the gill slits in Martha's neck by the time they reached Swedetown. The change, she still had her feet and could breathe air, but her sides felt stiff and scaly. The change was beginning. She wanted to jump into the water and finish it. Not yet. Boutrille himself splashed out from the riverbank, grabbing the canoe's bow and peering down at Martha. Martha recognized him through blurry eyes, blinking hard as she sat up. It had been years since he visited Jahan, but he didn't seem to have changed. It's her? He asked Rahana. Her, Rahana said. Junior's tried to take her. She fled to the river. She's changing even as we speak. You've a token for her? Wordlessly, she offered the feather. Boutrille looked at it and nodded. He scooped Martha into his arms and carried her ashore. A distant trill of musical notes sound echoed from the town. A woman's voice rose high and raspy, containing a liquid fullness that provoked an aching loneliness deep in Martha's heart. Hear her? Boutrille asked Martha. She's singing for you. Martha strained in his arms, longing to join the music. Boutrille laughed softly. I'll get you there, bride of the river. I'll get you to her. He carried Martha through the shacks and huts that made up Swedetown. Cedar smoke swirled around them. Two guitars and a fiddle sang a haunting, sweet dance, skirling around the steady beat of hand-slapped drums. Martha twitched in rhythm to the drum beats that resonated deep throughout her body. At last they stopped in front of a plank longhouse. Boutrille eased Martha down, holding her steady until she stood without swaying. He pulled the door open as the fiddle keened through an intricate reel. Cedar smoke washed over Martha as the door opened. She picked up the beat of the drums and danced inside, turning to the right and picking up the step as she joined the dancers. She twirled to the beat. The music and the cedar smoke twined around her like river's currents. She weaved in and out with the masked dancers as one by one they stepped into the open space in front of the fire to perform their solo piece of the great work. Then it was her turn to dance. The slashing joy of the fiddle carried Martha into the great open space. She danced the simple beginnings of the mountain's child. She danced Jahan's settlement and the old highway, now cracked and covered with weeds and trees. She danced her walk to the great river, danced the eagle chasing the gulls away from the salmon carcass. She danced her attack and Rahana's rescue. She danced the changes throbbing through her body as she rode in the canoe, surging and ebbing like the tides on the river. She danced her arrival at Swedetown, ending on the high, quavering, trembling pitch of the fiddle. Fiddle and guitars and drums stopped on that single sharp, hard, high note. Martha quivered in front of the great fire. She held the eagle feather in the trembling fingers of her left hand. The medallion dangled from her right hand. No sound stirred through the longhouse, save for the soft crackles of the great fire. Hidden Mother came forward. She bowed low to Martha and eased first the eagle feather, then the medallion from Martha's numb fingers. Martha would have dropped to her knees in front of Hidden Mother, but she could no longer feel them. Who are you? Hidden Mother asked. Bride of the River, Martha croaked. Hidden Mother stroked Martha's brow with the eagle feather. And you came from? Mountain's Child, Martha answered, her tongue growing shorter and tighter. And what do you seek, Mountain's Child, Bride of the River? Protection for those along the child, Martha husked, remembering the words Jahan had taught her. Protection and River's gift to the mountain. Hidden Mother surveyed Martha. What price do you offer? Myself, Martha breathed, with the last of her voice. The final transformation washed over her body. She fell onto the ground in front of Hidden Mother, flapping her tail. Hidden Mother knelt next to Martha. She bowed low. Then she raised her hand to the sky, calling out in a high, liquid voice. River stirred. Hidden Mother called again. Hands touched Martha, lifting her body, guiding her out the door and back down the path to River. Hidden Mother called a third time. River answered, surging gently through the village to reach Martha's twisting, long body. Come to me, my child, he whispered. The time to dance has begun. Martha yearned to dance with him, but something held her back. She turned her great eye toward Hidden Mother, trying to ask through fins and twist. Hidden Mother laughed. Your request is granted. The people of the Mountain's Child will live in peace with River's protection upon them, as long as they walk in harmony with the river and the child. You have done well, O Mountain's Child. Go now to River's depths and dance in his arms till we meet again. Martha twisted away from the hands of Swedetown and deep into River's waiting arms. One fleeting memory of the mountain and its snows came to her with the faint taste of the Mountain's Child among River's waters. Then she tasted more rivers and creeks in River's depths and was gone amongst River's song, her voice but a tiny thread amongst the whole. River kissed, River blessed, child of the river. And
Oh,
that
nice. I feel like we couldn't have had two more different stories tonight, despite a lot of reflection of the natural world in both of them. Very different stories, but both lovely in their own way. This one felt very Wiccan to me. Not witchy, but Wiccan.
I was trying for more of a cross of a native feel because it's very rooted in the Columbia River below the Sandy River, right by the airport, and then below, and there is actually further downriver a place called Swedetown.
Well, that makes sense. I'm just not familiar with it. So I guess that I just went to the closest thing that I knew.
Right, which, there are those elements.
Blessed be, yes.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us tonight, everyone. We've had another wonderful night of stories. Next week, Daniel and I will be back, and the readers next week will be Timothy G. Huguenin and Todd Keisling. I do recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of the reading for any announcements or changes. And, storyhour2020.com is also a great place to learn about upcoming authors. You can watch any programs you may have missed, watch this one a few more times if you like, on the Story Hour page on Facebook. Karlo, Joyce, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you most of all to our founder, Daniel Marcus, without whom literally none of us would be here in this Zoom this evening. And thank you, all of you here with us tonight, all of you who are watching on Facebook sometime in the future, because as long as you're here with us enjoying the stories, it's all the same story hour. Good night.